Cindy, how you doing?
Doing well, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
I'm really looking forward to having you on the show. You've got a couple good stories that you're willing to share with us. And you were on John Warlow's show, which is where I first got a little bit of a taste of what you've done. And you and I were chatting a little bit before the show. And I'm excited because you've got a lot of insights from the couple exits that you've had. But for the listeners that haven't really gotten the full exposure, can you guys just give us a couple of the cliff notes of the couple companies that you've started and sold and what you're doing now?
Sure. So I've built and sold 2 pharmaceutical companies. The last one I sold was Sprout Pharmaceuticals, which is best known for what the media dubs female Viagra, for getting the first ever drug for women to market. There were 26 drugs for men when I started out, not a single one for women. And I knew it all too well because my previous company that I had built from scratch had one of those male sexual health drugs. So been in healthcare most of my career, had 2 pretty big exits, the last one for $1 billion that get a lot of people's attention. And now have built in the process of building yet another company in the pink ceiling, as well as getting my old company back. So we got a lot to talk about.
Which I'm so excited to, because that was some of the things that happened with Sprout. I'm excited to dive into. But before we go into all that, Cindy, how did you decide to get into the big pharma? And then when did you decide did you decide to become an entrepreneur, or was it an accident? Where was the inception?
I love that question, because I have to tell you, I've thought about that a lot. And I tease that I must have decided in my childhood, because every single game that I structured, I owned my own business. I don't know. That was, in fact, just the only way that my big brothers would play with me, because they manipulated me into running my own kitchen, which in essence made me get things from the refrigerator and bring it to them on the couch. So maybe my big brothers picked for me. But, I've always had a love of business. I have had, when I got into pharma, that one was a little bit by accident. So entrepreneur, I ultimately chose. I think the wiring was there from a very young age, but the love of business precipitated getting out of college and wanting to work for Fortune's most admired company. And really, it was that singular in its focus. If I go learn from the best, I can apply it to anything. At the time, Fortune's most admired company was Merck, giant pharmaceutical company. So I went there with the intention of learning business, fell in love with the science, realized that big was not for me, and then chased innovation and went smaller, 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 until I finally realized, what the hell are you doing creating all of this value for other people that you're not participating in the winnings for? I feel like, I have enough gray hair and Rolodexes, and robust enough, if you will, that I can go out and start something on my own. So I did it. And that was really born out of a hypothesis that there were other people like me in this industry. I love the industry for what it can do.
And that's what I want. Because you got so much passion behind it, which is what we'll be diving a lot into. But and explain the industry for the listeners, because you have a very unique passion behind some of the things that you've been doing. And how did you get into the sexual health industry? I mean, what's kind of the driving motive that wakes you up every morning that has to do with this?
I tease, Irish Catholic sex. My parents would say that.
No, you do not love it, right?
I got into this niche. So I worked in a lot of different therapeutic categories, but in particular, this one is relatively young in terms of what we understand. And it's scientifically fascinating because of so much of our discovery. And really, for me, sex is part of the human experience. It's really part of who we are, our moxie, how we show up in this world. And it's important for most all of us, and yet we overlook it. I'm fascinated by the things we overlook. And why do we, sort of marginalize it with humor? And I know that's the comfortable way to talk about sex. And yet, if you watch people who are struggling with issues, true medical issues that we have known about forever, and we don't address them, it really sort of, destroys their life as they know it. When I started sort of being a crusader, if you will, in this space, people would say, come on, Cindy, nobody's going to lose their life from this condition. And what I would say is go talk to them, because they're living their life as they know it. So I have a real passion for it. I think it's a backbone of the human experience.
It's interesting, just a total side note on that. I heard this quote from someone, I might totally screw it up, so forgive me, but it was it's sex is 10% of a relationship, but if you're not having it, it's 90% of it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, there's actually data around that. So good call.
Did I actually get it right?
Yeah, it's incredible. The additive value is relative in a good relationship, but what you take away, and it's really that, let's face it, if things have broken down in the bedroom, they've broken down across the breakfast table. And that it's so integral to our connection with a partner for most of us, and for most people's life experience.
So how did you just explain? And we can totally bounce back and forth between the two companies that you started, because you had mentioned that you did things differently both times, and then also what you're doing now. Because I think there's this kind of themes. How did you start the first company, and then which was Slate, right? And then also how did that translate into doing things differently with Sprout?
Yeah. Well, look, its name was Slate, right? Truly started with the clean slate. I was going to do it on my own terms. I had been in the industry for some time. I, loved some of the mission, hated a lot of the processes, felt like there were environments in which basically you tried to create uniformity. I feel like cultures today try to create like this, homogeneous pool, if you will, as opposed to like celebrating individuality. So I thought there are probably other people, they're performing well, they're determined on their own right to be, excellent in terms of their performance. But what if you put them in an environment, gave them permission to be themselves, celebrated sort of the individual strengths, what could you tackle together? And then started looking for an asset. And the asset that I came across was this male sexual health drug. It was at the time the FDA's only long-acting testosterone that was approved. So for male sexual health, loved the category, loved the science, and really just started, hand-picking people. I mean, we very much are a culture of misfit toys. We were successful in conventional environments, and yet really uninspired, didn't fit. Started building this team, putting them together, giving this sort of different permission, this real focus and return to focus on patient. And I think what we did together was extraordinary. So Slate was in so many ways like the proof, the thesis sort of proven out, like this can be done, even though we operate inside of, incredible confines of regulation and everything else in this industry, you don't have to operate with no imagination. And I think it's a laziness inherently in the industry that there isn't more, seeking of creativity or lessons from other sectors. And so out of Slate, out of that ride in male sexual health, it's really how I got a beat on Addyi, which is the drug for female sexual desire, and was watching this spectacular science emerging and watching all these companies walk away. And it was crazy because it was clearly not on the basis of the science. The science was spectacular. It was really on the basis of this cultural narrative and these belief systems we have around women and sex. And so when everyone else was walking away, it was my signal to go in. So I sold off the business with the male drug and took this on.
So which is, first of all, the teams that we'll make sure we come back to building teams, because I think it's one of the funnest things ever when you have when you have the magic that goes into it. And on that note, Cindy, is like, did you have the teams go back that follow you to Sprout? And then how did you raise money for Slate? Because I know you can maybe you can give the differences of how you did it with Slate versus how you did it with Sprout.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, they actually ended up being very similar in that, and this will not surprise you, Ryan, because if you see me, I show up in blazing hot pink and don't exactly like classic pharma exec. So no surprise to anybody that I also wasn't going to get money in the conventional way. Never mind. The numbers are stacked against me because only 2% of venture capital goes to female-founded companies. So I ended up, I am a shameless entrepreneur in that I love to tell everybody what I'm doing, service to them if I didn't tell them what I was doing. And thankfully doing that, ended up getting to one right ear who, introduced me to their two friends, who introduced me to their four friends. I've raised all of my money incredibly in such a capital intensive industry through high net worth or family offices. So I've not taken any traditional venture money. So I raised money in both companies, but it has not been, maybe as no surprise, the conventional path there either.
That's Sequoia Capital.
I never had I never was the chosen one.
Right. And what maybe this is a time, if you want to say it, I loved your phrase at the bottom of the pink ceiling.
Oh. Is mine fuck the unicorn, be the workhorse?
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Yeah. Like let's actually do it the right way and actually make some money and do the right thing.
Exactly, because you know what? If you set out, and I think so many times as I'm talking about Sprout and $1 billion exit, and people talk about, unicorn, like if we had shown up day one and declared we were going to be the next unicorn, here's what I would tell you, Ryan, we would not have been successful. Put your
Mhm.
head down, do the work, be the workhorse. That's how you get to these outcomes. And those are the people I look to join me, not anybody who's got, their declaration of greatness before
Mhm.
they've ever executed. And I do think that's a problem in entrepreneurship today.
So let's dive into that because I think there was a guy that I interviewed on my podcast and he just worded it so beautifully and he said that all money has personality. So
Mm,
money's not just money, but like what you have done for both of these companies, I think is very unique in that you found the right money, but
yes,
also that you built the right teams. So like
yes.
explain the makeup of what that's like for you.
Well, I'll tell you, in terms of finding the right teams, I find people who have a deep passion for business, they're builders and they're owners. And that is not only do they come to me with that personality type of, truly owning it to their core. That means they're accountable for everything. They love creating value. They want a piece of the value they created, but it's also making them owners, which I think so many businesses miss. And there is a way to get people's skin in the game. So, I mean, think that's the fundamental, the personality, if you will, for us is the personality of ownership of everybody who works for me, of the cultures we create. And then from a money perspective, I got to tell you, the people who've come on this ride with me really are double bottom line people. Like it wasn't only about the return, it was about the mission. It was a belief in what we were trying to do. And sort of thank God, because I had so many twists and turns in which I think, had it been an investor who managed this spreadsheet, they would have been out calling, like waving the flag a lot sooner. And they really did hang with me. And I think that made all the difference ultimately.
I love it. Are you familiar with conscious capitalism?
Yes.
Isn't I just
Yes.
love it. I don't
Yes.
know. I don't know if you. I mean, that you mentioned the double bottom line. I was with some guys yesterday morning where it's all about the triple bottom line. They've got this company called Woodchuck USA where they sell like wood notebooks and all this stuff, and it's buy one, plant one. And they've their goal is plant 10 million trees by 2021, and they've already got 2 million down. It's so cool.
Incredible. It's great. I love it. I mean, that's what you should be investing in, those kind of things. If it is managed to the spreadsheet, it's probably got no soul. And I think those businesses that have no soul are never really the defining businesses.
So let's explain to us as you're for either of these companies as you're growing them. Um, how are you taking your team? What are some of the big milestones that you were trying to accomplish, and what was the mission and the passion that you were pushing down, and what was it the goal that you were marching towards?
Yeah. So I think in Sprout, the mission, or let me take it back. In Slate, the mission was to do it differently, to be hyper conscious, if you will, of the patient experience, to return, I think, to what I'd call the fundamentals, go old school in the
Mhm.
business, where I think in so many ways pharma has so disconnected with the patients that they serve. And really, this idea of could you take these very, this eclectic mix of people and achieve great success? And we built a brilliant, it was a wonderful product. Like, you got to have a great product, right? But we built this incredible business that I think was as much about the culture of how we were doing it differently than almost anything. And then on Sprout, look, the mission is very straightforward, and that is to give women with a medical condition that we have known about for decades an option, and to remove all of those narratives that are impeding progress, to strip it down, have an evidence-based discussion, and whether they take it or don't take it, by God, they deserve the choice. And
Mhm.
that's really what we're all about, is giving if I'm being very ambitious, it's to change the cultural conversation about women and sex. So we're very mission driven, in terms of how we get these things done, and we're pretty singular in our focus. I think we think we'll do one thing, we'll do it really well. We don't hedge our bets by like adding in a bunch of other products just to make sure we're de-risking. Like, we're going all in,
Mhm.
and we're going to try to get these things done.
So, what was that like finding investors that had the same passion for this as you? And then how did you structure that so that way when hard times came across that you guys were all aligned and could, like you said, the flag wasn't going up?
Well, first, let me tell you, I didn't do it right from the beginning. So I will tell you that's my biggest fail is that, early on, here I am with this company. We're starting to get inbound calls from physicians who say, why hasn't a rep been by to see me? This is my field. And we're thinking, holy cow, like here we are, because the thought leaders were so excited about our technology. They were talking about it at medical conferences. And frankly, I didn't have the money to really build out the sales force. And I felt like I had an urgency, right? I had to do it quickly. And so I did a partnership with a company who would dedicate their entire sales force to our efforts. It was sort of, overnight. Holy crap. Talk about like the ink was not even dry and our philosophies
Oh, no.
departed, as far as the left and the right of the room, if you will. We just did not see, we have the same philosophy on how you compensate people, how you treat people. And so now I'm stuck with them. And it took me a year to get them out and to get somebody else in. But I learned a critical lesson very early, which is I was choosing to. And I think it's really hard, when you're building these businesses, you have this moment with this potential to scale, and somebody's willing to write you a big check. You just got to take a breath, step back, and really make a decision if you want their money. And thank God again that happened, because I had chose who else came into the business. And I really grew from friends of friends. And I really asked for that because I knew that they knew who I was. They knew the mission I was. They would have already sort of pre-screened, if you will, who they were introducing me to. And that's how we ultimately got all the money. And I think that how I kept them with me is ever so simple. I'm hyper communicative. There were never any surprises. They were on this ride with me. They were every bit a part of it. And I think we were talking just a little bit earlier about, money and this personality of money. What I worry about is that we're losing that. And, for me, when they gave me money, I saw it as their children's college fund. I saw it as their aging parents going into the long-term care facility. They were giving me their hard-earned money, and it was my responsibility to pay it back and then some. And I worry that in this moment of, the unicorn declaration early and all of those things, we think of money as just, oh, well, okay, it just came in and I can lose it. And they already knew and there were risks. And we don't have that sort of responsibility to it. And all of these investors are now really a sort of a secret weapon to me, because I get excited about an idea and I send it out to a national network of people who bet on me, and I'm getting them to bet on other female entrepreneurs.
What I was going to say is, you bring up some amazing points, and you're communicating your mission and your vision to all these people. And as, when you look at all the different people that are, sitting by you, Cindy, as you're building these companies, and then all as throughout the exits and choosing the buyers, I find it a lot of times, like I went through the same thing. And a lot of the people I interview or with my clients, that they don't even, they might do that maybe they do that with the investors, but then how did that impact your ability to hire your team of the investment bankers and the attorneys, and then finding the buyers? Because there's marriages all over the place, and
There really are.
so
Yeah.
how did you, maybe if you can shed some light on like the teams that you built outside of just the capital.
So, my team is just, I love my team, and I wouldn't be here without like extraordinary people who made a bet on me as well to come, and they would, rip the sheets off every morning and go to work for me as owners. And finding them, I think, is in many ways was this gut instinct. I think in the interview process, I interviewed everyone. It's one of my principles. Like, there's nobody who's coming into my business that I haven't had an opportunity to get to meet and know their kids' names and their dogs' names and everything else, because we really are co-owners in it. And I think, I'm a lot about the conscious choices that they make every day when they show up in this world. And we talk about 6 different choices in our organization. But in terms of the bench, like when you're small, you better be developing your bench. And I think is really as simple as inviting people into your fund. So just like I was talking about, inviting the investors into the fund, like we didn't have a company unless they were giving us money and they were owners in it as well. It's inviting people into this mission. It's that passion, I think, that draws them in. And then it's obviously, you're constantly looking for those better than you are to give you advice. When I sat at the table on, to sell the businesses, and they really did happen a little bit by, we focused on from the outset, like create value. That's what we're here to do. We're going to create value. And when you create value, people notice. And then people start calling you. And so I think as opposed to sort of the formality of the process or the idea that, oh, we're going to build it to this size and then we're going to shop it, we really were just focused, let's create value, and then they'll come. And it worked out that way. And I will say, between the bankers and the legal team, we talk a lot in entrepreneurship about who is the bank that went out and sold it with you. I got to tell you, my legal team was even more important. And I'm talking about my external group, the group that wrote the deals and ultimately wrote the contracts to sell off the company. They were invaluable. And I think people may overlook that.
I could not agree with you more. And it's so interesting as I've interviewed gazillions of advisors and experienced a lot of them. I mean, investment bankers will hold their weight in gold, for just being the intermediary and making sure everybody's emotions are in check. But like what I found, Cindy, and like I'm curious if you got any like specific stories in your couple exits, that the legal part of all this stuff in the deal structure, it glues everything together, and it could totally make or break everything. So I just like, there's nothing more important than that, especially the people that the legal team should know so much about the deal structure, but then the tax, all the stuff, the taxes, everything. So like,
for sure.
Can you get a couple examples of like some of the stuff that they did?
Love to, because I'll tell you the difference between selling company 1 and 2 was the legal team and the kind of lesson learned, right? If you're a good entrepreneur, you're constantly learning. You're constantly screwing something up, and then you're getting better because the next time you won't do it again. You want to see it twice. But when I structured it, so typically both of my transactions were cash up front and structure on the back end, so royalties. And so in the first one, cash up front, this brilliant like royalty mailbox money going to come for years. But what governed that was and I'm putting air quotes up, best efforts clause. Classic legal boilerplate language, right? Best efforts. Well, hey, guess what? Like your version of best efforts and my version of best efforts,
a little different,
maybe a little bit different. and so, you sit as a founder and you're like, whoa, they're not doing this, they're not prioritizing that, whatever it may be, which is directly impacting how much you're being paid for it. And never mind, it's your baby, so you want to see it thrive. So when I went into the second deal, I thought about that a lot. And with the legal group, put really specific performance obligations in the contract. So same thing, cash up front, structure on the back end, but these are the following things that would be a basic expectation. So how much money they would spend on marketing, on education, how many salespeople they would have out there educating the clinical community, the things germane to my industry. And it wasn't like I was making huge asks. These were like 101 of marketing. But actually having that specificity in the contract is what gave me the door in to go back and get the company back.
Which is crazy.
Really it was the structure of the documents of the sale that made all of the difference. So many times, and I know this happens for you too, Ryan, like entrepreneurs are coming, they're thinking about selling their business. They want you to tell them everything about the bankers and like, wait, let's talk about the legal team who's coming in, because that's going to make it or break it.
Well, totally. And and it's so interesting because I don't know what it is about entrepreneurs where they just want to get, and I'm totally guilty of it too. Like the next best thing. So like, let's just move on. Right. This is a stepping stone. Let's go. But then what happens is like, what I say, like anything you can creatively think about, you can put in a document, like anything.
That's right.
Right. You just have to make sure someone can negotiate it for you.
Of course. Right. Put it in, like at least start there, ask for it. Right. And take it from there for sure. I do think there is like entrepreneurs and I think there's a difference between, I call it the founder CEO and the forever CEO. Mm-hmm. Like we love to build. But I think that you should always be a little reluctant to give it up, and I think that will command such greater value. You're in it to take it all the way through. You're not going to be dependent on them to come in. So you can certainly do it yourself. And I think that's where you get, real value in transactions. And I will say, it is both exhilarating and excruciating to sell your company.
What do you mean by that? And elaborate.
I think, the exhilaration isn't it like the entrepreneur's dream come true? Holy cow, I built it. Somebody saw it. They're going to take it to the next level. They're going to take it global, whatever it may be. That's exhilarating that you've seen it through. And yet the excruciating part is, hey, guess what? You're now standing on the sidelines and somebody else has your baby. And when you had this baby, you had a whole vision for how they were going to grow up in this world, what they were going to go on to do. And suddenly you're no longer calling the shots. So you think like you found the perfect adoptive parents and they have more resources than you and they can send them to better schools and, like all of those things. And yet, oh my gosh, they might not actually have the same vision as you. And so I've certainly lived that of standing on the sidelines as well, and some of the heartbreak and loss of something that's so integral to who you are. I think, if
Totally well said.
that you're so connected to it.
I could not agree more, and you articulated it very well, Cindy. And I actually think that it's like a total reflection of you. Like it's the people you hire, the investors, and like how you deal with your clients. I mean, it's literally a derivative of you almost every single place you look.
No question. It's your identity. It's identity in so many ways. I agree.
So then let's go back maybe and kind of take the journey through that what was maybe some of the steps that you were taking? Because, you went through a grueling FDA approval, and then we kind of walk through like, how did because you had said that you were planning on doing it and creating value and doing it yourself. So at what point, did the knocks on the door come? And, to use your analogy, when did you think that it was okay to hand your kid off to someone else versus taking it yourself?
Okay, so what happened is, if you know the sort of the FDA process, at the final moment, in our particular case, the FDA assembled this expert panel. So experts in the field to come in, look at all of our data, put us on trial, so to speak, as the company, ask us all of these questions. The public had a chance to comment. And what they do is they then vote and give their vote to inform FDA's decision. And so there's a period between that vote and the FDA's final approval or disapproval, if you will, so rejection. So they voted overwhelmingly to approve the drug. So all of a sudden, the big companies went, wait, what?
Yeah, right.
The little company who could in Raleigh, North Carolina is actually going to get it done. And so that's when they came calling. So it was very interesting. People were surprised. We literally got the drug approved. We announced we were selling it the next day. And it's because that period had happened in between, in which everybody saw the approval was coming. And I think that for me, when they came calling, there were a few different suitors. And actually the suitor who emerged the winner, if you will, part of the reason I chose them is they would keep the team. And so there are a few things. Like, it was right in the sense that they could march it across the globe. They had the infrastructure, and this shouldn't just be a drug in the United States. It should be a global drug. They could make it more broadly, more affordably accessible to women. That mattered to me. And they were going to keep the team. And the reason that was so important to me, and it was in Slate too, by the way, they took the entire team with them, is I know that it's people. Businesses are people. And they're who show up, who care the most, who are going to put it in, all that time, all that love, and then blood, sweat, and tears. And so what was so crushing to me is when they I was going to stay too, by the way. So when they bought the company, we were going to be decentralized. They were going to be this incredible sort of bank account. We were going to get to execute this big vision we had. It became very clear very quickly that I wasn't going to be the person with the CEO. And I had to check myself. I'm the founder. I'm Mama Bear. Like, I have somebody just came in and paid $1 billion for your company. It's their company. And so I really felt like when I got invited to leave, I like to call it, I stepped out and, thought, well, my best will be at least my people are there. And I'll be the biggest cheerleader in the world because I love this. I love this mission. And then the crushing blow was when they dismantled my entire team, because that had been a piece of why I picked them. And so as soon as the people who were the heart and soul, I think, of the mission were out, it's how it all fell apart.
Well, and I want to dive into that. But maybe for some context for the listeners, so it was Valiant that purchased you guys. Maybe just kind of give a quick cliff notes on what happened and why some of this transpired. And I'm curious, and within that news, like how you're letting go and your team, where that fell into the sequence of events of what they were going through.
Oh, sure. So we announced this transaction in August of 2015. Deals don't close for some time, right? They've got to go through all the regulatory stuff. It didn't close until October the 1st. And on October the 11th, Valiant got a Department of Justice letter because of some issues they had with an undisclosed pharmacy. So Valiant, at the time they purchased us and the time our agreement began in August, was sort of the darling. And they were, trading at something like 260 a share. They had traded down to as low as $8 a share in the, subsequent year. Their CEO was turned over. There's a new CEO there now. And so they really, they had their own internal crisis that we could have never seen coming. So in many ways, they had a business that went into crisis mode, and this was the last thing in. And I think that it just was overwhelming to suddenly be launching a new first in class, first in category drug amidst all of this other stuff going on. And so it kind of got put on the shelf. And there wasn't a champion team inside. They dismantled the team, and there it sat. And I think that's why it happened. Their intention when they came to us was really to demonstrate the ability to grow something from scratch. I think they were very good at acquisition. They thought they'd go out and buy other products in women's health. That sounded brilliant to me. It's an area obviously I'm deeply passionate about, and we built this wonderful women's health franchise. But it just didn't go that way. And so as it sat there, and for all the fight we had given for women to finally have access, for them then to not have access, really just reignited me to start knocking on their door and say, give it back.
Well, and I'm just right, which we'll get into. Cindy, what was it like when you have this vision of how the world's going to unfold, and that when it's tied into your vision of, that's a global scale of having women have access to this, and a vision of your team, and that's why you picked these people. That there was an alignment of vision. And what was it like for you to watch that be dismantled?
There were a lot of tears. And I think there was, deep regret on my part that I hadn't seen it coming. And that was, it felt like, failing your people. I can, when I stepped out, when it was clear that I wasn't going to be the right personality fit, because when things started to go sideways with Valiant, I became louder. Like, what's going on? I need answers. What's happening? And I think in that way I was a little bit of a threat, and that I was out. I felt like still for my team to be there, I could cheer them on. And then when they got rid of all of them, I was crushed for all of them because their heart had been in it. I tell you, the happy part of that story is so many of them are back with me today. So they went on with their lives. And, the last several years, they had new companies they were in and everything else. And lo and behold, they dropped everything to come back, which is just a testament, I think, to who they are and how much they care about this. But I went through a real crisis in that period of time. And so much of it was just about letting people down, and worrying that I'd let not only the people who'd worked for me down, but also women down, because it's had a larger than life. I will tell you, as I went through that, and I was struggling with that, I finally did kick myself in the ass and say, okay, this is not who you are. Like, you go, go fix it, go figure something out. And that wasn't only about getting Sprout back. It was also really what informed Pink Ceiling, because I think what I got to do is reflect on what came out of this, which was a front row lesson in, what it means to advocate for women to advocate for each other. And I thought, by God, my work is not done. I'm going to reach my hand back, and I'm going to get other women to these outcomes. And this is how we're going to change things. And so, because of the hitting the low, if you will, after that, I have the wonderful opportunity today inside the Pink Ceiling to change it for others.
And I want to get into the Pink Ceiling too in a sec, but to go back, what was it, going back to the actual letting down, and the way that I kind of describe my experience was the rug got pulled out from my vision. You know what I mean? And honestly, our exit was a microcosm of what because there was no B on mine. It might have been somewhere in an accounts payable, something like that.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, most people would say, well, come on, Cindy, get over it. Right. But they don't realize that it's not about the money. And so how do you reconcile that?
That is so true. Yeah. I don't know that anybody feels sorry for me. They saw, they really did. They go, wait a minute, you got this big of an exit. Are you really sad? Are you not sitting on the beach? And what you realize is that it's never about the money. And, I'm fortunate to know a lot of people who've done really extraordinary things and to call them friends. And I will tell you, the common thread is they didn't do it for the money. They may be wildly successful, but these are not people content to go have the little umbrella in their drink for the rest of time. They're restless in terms of changing things and building things that really make a difference. And so I think nobody was feeling sorry for me, but that was actually also hard because
Most lonely part about it, right?
very lonely in like this devastation when everybody thought you should be doing cartwheels. And I think that, that actually makes you feel almost further isolated in it. So that was a tough time. And I talked to a lot of people about exits, about what you feel when I did it. I can't really have a measurement from Slate to Sprout because this will tell you a lot about me. Slate was a big exit as well. And we literally sprouted out of Slate a day before we sold it. And I was working there the next day. Like there was no downtime. So I do think that, it really never is about the money. It's about the love of what you're trying to accomplish.
100% agree. And then what was the triggering event that helped you rebuild your identity? Because by the way, before we go on that, have you ever heard of the book called Finish Big?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
So you're gonna love it. It's by a dear friend, Bo Burlingham,
Okay.
who's also a friend of John Warlow's, and it's literally about he talks about 75% of entrepreneurs are upset 12 months after the sale, regardless of how much money they make, because they know who they were or what they wanted from their company and why. And I read this book, unfortunately, after we sold.
Of course, right?
and then he goes, you know what the most terrifying question that you could ask an entrepreneur that is sold 12 months later? What do you do?
Right.
They're like,
so true. So true. Someone told, I'm not going to get it right too. There's a wonderful woman who's a dear friend of mine who said to me, like the two most terrifying things are having no options or having every option. And actually, like what happens? Like, what do you do if suddenly, like everybody sees it as transformation? You still show up you wake up the next day, you're the same person, right? You don't do anything differently. I have a wonderful guy who manages my money. He showed up, I think a couple weeks ago, and he said, all right, so you live in the same house, you drive the same car, and I'm pretty sure you were wearing that the last time I came in, so we're good. Okay. I mean, maybe his commentary is maybe you should be doing something different, but like, this is what I love. And, my work is my hobby. My hobby is my work. Like, what would I be doing if I wasn't doing this? And I think that's really what happens is the work that you have been doing that was so focused on this one business, when it's gone, you really have to very quickly, in my mind, if you're wired this way, find the next thing for your own sanity. Or it's so, you're lost in it. And I found it in the Pink Ceiling.
Well, and let's get into the Pink Ceiling, but what also, you got the company back. So it's not just the Pink Ceiling. You literally got your baby. Your baby went to college and came back. So
didn't end up, actually never got off the bus, unfortunately. So we're back with, and the truth is, the day we sold this business, we were the largest news story in the world. It was incredible. Incredible to be part of it, incredible to witness to it. And, there was just so much momentum, and it went to deafening silence in the absence of leadership. And so really, it's not like starting at the same baseline. It's actually starting somewhere behind. And that's interesting too, to have it back. But what happened with the Pink Ceiling, so, I've said, I thought my best work is going to be helping others. I'm an female entrepreneur. I know that the numbers are stacked against me in terms of getting money, in terms of getting mentorship. And so how do I do my part in that? And so we have an umbrella of companies that we invest in, that we incubate, and, my business team sort of surrounds them and helps pull them to launch. And they're all very disruptive first. They're buyer for women, but Sprout actually fell back under that umbrella. So our mission kind of got bigger under the Pink Ceiling, and then Sprout has folded back in as one of the Pink Ceiling companies. So it's incredible to have it back. And what I said earlier, I'll tell you, Ryan, the most incredible thing, and I've already said it, but it's that so many of my team came back.
That's awesome.
And they dropped what they were doing. So it really is, getting the band back together, and kind of getting it right. And when we had this opportunity, so there was a suit with Valiant because we had these really specific performance obligations in the contract. And, the path to more money was the lawsuit. So shareholders had to vote on getting this back. And there was a path to more money. But I will say not a single one voted against the transaction.
How
And
cool.
that's again, like that they believed in getting it right, that their pride wasn't getting it right. We had a big exit. Now it's really about, making right on what we set out to do in the beginning. And so it's been interesting. It's, and I'm back totally in startup mode. Like
It's
I said,
just
we're sort of starting almost, I don't want to call it in the holes per se, but like with years having passed from that wind in our sails,
yeah.
now trying to reignite, I think, people around it, and just try to get the supply chain and all of those things. So I'm really proud of what the team has done just in the last year, and we're really kind of just getting started, if you will, with the launch of the product in this year.
And explain, so which you've got the same kind of passion and mission, and so the mission hasn't changed behind that, but I can tell the passion that you've got from the pink ceiling, and it sounds like your identity has grown as you have a new, bigger mission that isn't tied to a specific product, actually, right? So, like, explain how and what is the mission and passion behind the pink ceiling?
Well, what I'll say to you, I will say, I was thinking when I started out, like when I first became an entrepreneur, really the mission in Slate was to create this culture in my own little world. Like inside of my company, I can create this culture that I want a company to have in this world. And I think the evolution has been from these cultures, how do we impact the culture at large? And that's been the step up, if you will, in the aspiration. So it gets bigger, if you will, over time in terms of what we're hoping to do.
And what is some of the challenges
Oh
this?
wait, I didn't answer that.
No,
Wait,
no, no, it's totally cool. No, I appreciate
of,
that.
of the pink ceiling, I'll tell you what my mission is. The pink ceiling, and you'll bleep me out, but it's to make women really fucking rich.
I
And I'll
love
tell
it.
you
I
why.
love
I
it.
say, and that frankly is because women don't have access to capital, they don't have access to mentorship, and I want to get other women to outcomes like mine because it shouldn't be a lonely club. And what the reason I want to do that is because when I do that, we change who sits at the other side of the decision making table. We change the ability. Money is power. Money is power to invest in those things we deeply care about, to those ideas that we want to see in this world. And if it's still the construct that it is today, which is dominantly men who can't relate to some of these products, they're not bad people. They just don't invest in those things that they don't particularly relate to.
Mhm.
Then, we never get to see that change. And for me, the greatest joy in building and selling companies has been to create owners and this army of owners, and this multiplier effect of ownership is really what we're trying to do in the pink ceiling. So if we get them to outcomes and they invest in the next round and the next round, you suddenly have this incredible freedom for people. And I'm not just talking financial freedom, it's freedom to kind of do what you really and deeply care about. And I've watched that happen with people who've come and worked for me. I'm so proud of people who've come to work for me who now own their own businesses, run their own businesses, and watching what they create. I love that multiplier effect.
Well, it is really true, and to go off on like a small tangent is I have interviewed a lot of women entrepreneurs on the show. I got pulled into EY's Winning Women.
Oh,
I
cool.
don't know if you know any of the women over there, or
Yeah.
so I have interviewed probably like 7 of them of who have grown and sold, and like I have this, like, and so they've kind of got the same, mission of helping women access capital. Which, by accessing capital is difficult for everybody because there is like this whole like elite crew
Oh, yeah.
over the last handful of decades that sit there and they just like they hoard the money, can do whatever they want.
Sure.
But I think what the reason I was bringing this up is women have this ability, in my honest opinion, that is more the conscious capitalism culture, people first, and the cultures and the businesses that women are capable of building is amazing. And
Yeah.
it is a multiplier effect, and to have more money in the women's hands just
Right.
makes way better.
My TEDx talk, Ryan, was called "The DNA of a Rule Breaker," and it was really talking about the DNA of a female rule breaker. And I think that increasingly, as we go to management by ones and zeros, like management by spreadsheet and all of the data. And look, I love data. Like I love
Mhm.
how it informs better decisions and everything else. But I do think that the factor in leadership of empathy is going to make all the difference, because I think data viewed through the lens of empathy, data is informed differently. if you will. And so I do think that's going to be such a strength of future leaders. And I do think women, have that DNA and that wiring of what makes them so exceptional, and why so many of these young women that I'm betting on that have incubator companies, holy cow, like they're just incredible, what they've set out to do. And I think completely to your point, sort of conscious capitalists.
It's like at what point, what's it all for? Right. So like you have to have that empathy layer to say, okay, well, we're going to change really cool stuff instead of just making money for money's sake with
Right.
wake of carnage.
Yeah.
What is if there's women out there that want to understand what the Pinkbator is and the pink ceiling, what's the ideal candidate? What is how do they get exposed to it? What's the best route?
So literally just look us up, pinkceiling.com, Pinkbator. You can follow all of our stuff, and we have a pitch process to come in. And what we're really looking for are breakthrough first, buyer for women. And those things that often we gravitate toward, those things I think that are catalysts in social conversation. I'll give you an example. So I've invested in a woman named Bethany Edwards. Her company is Leah Diagnostics. She has a flushable pregnancy test. Bethany, like this incredible engineer, geeky, just like I like. Just like
I love it.
what she's doing is she's disrupting what hasn't been touched forever since our like mom's pregnancy test. 80% of a pregnancy test today is plastic. Why? It doesn't need to be. Hers, completely biodegrades. And actually it's prompting, it's funny when I watch Bethany tell people what she's doing, because there's sort of a reaction like, well, why would you need that? Well, why do you need this discretion? Well, why don't we just ask women? And what we see are all of these ads in which the only outcome possibly could be this smiley face. And that's not always what women are seeking. Never mind, if we even are compassionate about it, if a woman is going through infertility, she might not want to walk into the bathroom, look at the waste paper basket, and be reminded she's not pregnant again. And so there's nuance to this, and there's complexity
100%.
in the conversation that's just going to be overlooked by classic, but is seen so clearly through the eyes of a female entrepreneur. So she's sort of prototypical. We do look for things that are probably 12 to 36 months out from launch. A lot of our entrepreneurs are often, just because of our background, scientists or engineers who have access to my business team to help them prepare to get to launch. And we look at, I don't want to so pigeonhole that we're just health tech, because we definitely do not conventional pharma or med device. We do a lot of consumer goods. We have one in athletics that detects possibility of future injury, really cool stuff. But I loved it, women to come to us. So what I would say to your listeners is send it to us. We might not be the right fit for you. Our commitment to you is we'll be candid in that. And we've got such a brilliant network of other women, guys doing great work, looking at this area of investing in female entrepreneurs that will pass it on. So we see a lot of investable ideas that might not be the perfect fit because we don't think we can give you as much of an advantage as someone else. So we hand it to them.
I love it. And don't you think just like for women that are thinking about this to just try stuff, like because now that there's platforms like yours that it's not as daunting. Like, I mean, they just have to like just give it a shot.
Totally. Take the risk. What are you waiting for? I will tell you that for sure. Nobody can take away anything you have done up until now. You've always got that. So that's in your back pocket. So if you want to go do something, take the shot, take the risk. And I do think now, I tease all the time that, I was an entrepreneur before it was cool in the sense of like the Shark Tank world and,
Right.
and all things were so much more in tune, and oh my God, they're cool. And now like there weren't resources like all of the co-working spaces, and I couldn't go on Eventbrite and find all of these, events in my area in which I can get into rooms with people who are doing the same thing, fighting the same battles as me, and create that network and peer-to-peer mentorship that I think is essential as you're building something out. So go get in the room with these folks and be wired with curiosity to find out what they're doing and how they might be doing it better.
I love it. Well, if there's anything that we want to wrap up with, Cindy, anything you want to highlight from, because we covered some serious ground, anything that you want to highlight or something that maybe we didn't touch on that you want to leave the listeners with?
I think it's just sort of the do's and don'ts. I would say do take risks, do stay uniquely you through it all. And do foster, I think, constructive irreverence in people around you. have them push you, so that you never are so convinced that you've got it right, that you're always learning yourself. And I guess on that, the sort of converse of that is never be a mimic.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a blast.
Me too. Thanks for having me.